Hey guys, it's Matt. This is the last chapter of the unnamed reality book. I never read this before. It could also be considered an afterword. I read the half-page reality, and that's how we closed the book. But in still going through it, spelling mistakes, cleaning up grammar, it's an acceptable draft. I still have a lot of work to do. I've emailed it out to a few people for safekeeping, so it's not just here on USB thumb drives in case anything happens. But this section, which wraps up, the entire purpose of why the book was written, getting out of the conspiracy bog, moving into part two, the work and what is important. This is, you could call it an afterword that summarizes the entire book. And I have not read this chapter before. It starts with something that basically says all the elements of the reality trick that we looked at in this book, how reality gives itself away, this list, its tactics over here. Basically, this says throw it all out. Throw everything out. We know enough at this point. Doesn't matter if you forget everything I listed out, the 20 ways reality gives itself away and the world proves itself to be fake. We know enough. We throw the bog out and we never step back in. That's the point of this transition into the last chapter. Matt, I forget all that you read. That's good. There's no reason to ever return to it. You know why? It's like you might not remember your karate training or your kung fu training, but you're pretty good. You don't need to remember it. You know enough. And that's exactly how this last chapter starts. Forget everything you've just read. You know enough about how their trick works. You don't need this book anymore. Live the rest of your life doing the work of part two. Forget the creeps and their conspiracy distraction forever. I'll close this book with what I think is the most important thing in life as we move through the days that we have left on earth. I've been intentionally vague as I've written about part two, the work. We each are on our own journey, and we all need to overcome different obstacles and learn different things along the way. However, there are some core principles that apply to all of us, and this is perhaps the most important one. Stopping during your busy day to smell a flower is a fun aspect of the work. That's the literal interpretation of gather ye rosebuds while ye may. But millions of other things associated with part two, the work, are also fun. The key is to continually work on your perception of the world around you, and that is done through exercises in perspective. It's something that needs to be worked on every day by everyone listening to this. It begins with appreciation and gratitude and the ability to see the wonder of this place and find the heaven hidden amidst all the hell. In my opinion, that is one of the main reasons we incarnated here. Somebody at some point, maybe you, your higher self, said, you can go in there, in that place, and you can find the heaven each day amidst all that bullshit, then you're doing something. When one achieves this change in perspective, their state of being becomes the opposite of shit like things we see all around us all the time. Constant complaining about politics, for example, and those damn Democrats. Perhaps the number one thing we struggle with in our community is why the people around us can't see what we can see. It frustrates us to no end. In our community, that sort of thing has led to countless divorces. I've witnessed it firsthand. But for us, this is all part of the work. Will you grow continuously frustrated with your spouse because they can't see through the trick as we do and they believe the news? Or will you focus on what you love about your spouse? What originally struck you? Will you be big enough to overlook what bothers you? For us, this world is not 50-50. It's not meet in the middle for us, not at all. We are a unique group. We have to go further or farther than they do. It's not 50-50 or meet in the middle. We must go farther, say, than your spouse or best friends to keep the relationship working. If you expect 50-50, it will not happen in this world. They are not capable of meeting us in the middle. Let me repeat that. They are not capable of meeting us in the middle. Those on the ship of fools are not able to see the most obvious of truths, as we all know. Pootie Tang Award. They're not ready. Call them what you want, young souls. If you expect them to come halfway to you, it will not happen. This sort of thing is part two, the work. I've seen two types of people since, quote, we woke up to the trick. The first person begins to kind of hate the people around them, hate their spouse or their brother or their best friend for being a normie or an NPC who can't see what we can see. The second person, the more advanced graduate, starts to do part two the work and focuses on their positive attributes and what they originally loved about them and magnifies the good while letting the frustrations of them, of say not being able to see, roll off the back like a duck through the water. What? Roll off their back like water off a duck. In many regards, the people around us are childlike to we old souls. Would you despise a child for not being able to see through the 7-Eleven job application? All of this is part two, the work. It's not fair. It's not 50-50. It may be we have to go 99% to their 1%. Get used to it. That's our role here. That's the price for being able to see. Everything here is duality, right? Everything here is give and take. What did they say in Event Horizon? When you broke the laws of physics, did you not think there would be a price to pay? Same with us. If you can see through every aspect of the reality trick, did you not think there would be something to give back on the other side? Exactly. And who would want to go back? We've all admitted we wouldn't go back into the ignorance is bliss state. So when these other frustrations say, this is great, this is wonderful, this is the price of me being able to see, this is the price of me winning, and pay the price gladly. The work is simple, yet very difficult at the same time. Those things are not mutually exclusive. Taking the high road in a family dispute is the first grade work, and many of us can't even do that. Keeping your mouth shut at the Thanksgiving table can be very tough. Seeing yourself as the greater being, though, should not be viewed as arrogant, but instead it's liberating. This is why engaging in an argument, dropping down to, quote, their level, their frequency, is always a losing proposition for us. There's nothing arrogant in seeing yourself as the greater being or the older soul. It's true. Sorry. We see through the trick. We're not delusional. We see right through it. That's a greater perspective. We shouldn't have to expect them to come 50-50 to us. We must be bigger. We must be prepared to give 95% while they only give 5 or 99-1, whatever it may be. This is the cross that we carry and the price for being able to see through this reality from top to bottom. Listen far more than talking. Stop correcting people. All millions of things we need to do in the category of part two, the work. There's no need to be right about anything. They will never be like us. They can't step into our shoes, so we must continuously step into theirs and try to understand where they're coming from. They're on the frequency. Okay, that we have to see things through their eyes. Give people a pass, even if they yell. A temper may be the outer manifestation of some sort of pain that they're going through. I mean, these are all tiny examples of the work that we must do every day. If you're very confused or continuously not sure as to what part two means after all that we've been through in this book, assume that part of you is not here in this place called Earth. Call it higher self, call it what you want. And ask yourself every day, what would this part of me that's not here want from me, the part that's here? I bet the answer is never going to be, I want more mud flood videos. I believe the most important part of doing the work is to change our perspective. Perspective is the key to everything. Why is my brother being such an asshole this week to me? Do I take his insults at face value or realize via a different perspective he may be struggling with his personal problems, taking it out on me? Maybe he's fighting with his wife again. He's just picking on me because he can't say certain things to her, and all this is a symptom of his pain. Evolving our perspective is very important, but as one hones these skills, starting out with the right perspective. When your brother's yelling at you, how quickly are you saying, maybe this is a symptom of something else? Does that take days? Or will you get yourself into such a Jedi Master state that within seconds, you're saying, I shouldn't be taking this personally, because maybe this is a symptom of changing and constantly adapting your perspective to adopt the right perspective as quickly as possible is a big part of part two, the work. Let's go back to what we've been studying for decades and the perspective on that. Are these creeps here with us, those residing here like Melvin and Bezzo and all the rest of the Santa Claus Schwabs, are they here simply to be evil? in and of itself, or perspective? Were they perhaps put here into this reality to fulfill a role that in some way I am going to benefit from? Takes a real graduate level truther to understand that may be possible. Are they a necessary actor in reality itself for my benefit, or just creeps? How you see this and everything else is based on perspective. Perception comes from perspective and working on it every day. There are reasons multiple Humpty Dumptys and stuffed Lenins and similar cliches all exist carrying forth this theme, like find the silver lining. I'm not closing a book like this with a focus on perspective for no reason. To me, in my opinion, it is the most important thing for us to do for the rest of our lives. It may be the primary reason, as I said a few minutes ago, we incarnated here. You can go into this mess and every day find the heaven, or in most situations, see it in the best light. Let me tell you what, you are doing something. How many people can achieve that who have ever existed? Very few. And as usual, you know how we know we're right or that this is right? Because what does Not Milk want us to do? What is the state it wants us in?
Oh, drones. Oh, no, drones. Those damn Republicans. Oh, Trump is coming. He's going to be king this time.
What is it? What state does it put us in? Bitch, complain, point at your neighbor, fly your Trump flag. This is proven true based on what Not Milk is trying to do to us every day, which is to put us in the opposite state, to blame, and everything is an outside influence. You're not responsible for anything, you son of a beach. If somebody has their car stolen, then that must be a horrible day for anyone. But really? Is it? If somebody's car is stolen today, what actually makes that a bad day? You make it a bad day. The ultimate lesson to learn is everything is up to us. When it appears like what dictates our behavior and our mood must be from an outside influence and beyond our control, as John Malkovich said to Michelle Pfeiffer. Does an action, event, or bad news in and of itself make or break your day or mood or spirit? Or do you decide if your day is good or bad? And I know you're doing Pootie Tang Award, Matt. Who doesn't know this, Matt? Oh, you're examining. It's too important not to stress over and over again. This is the reason we incarnated. My examples are relatively simple and pedestrian. They have to be. It's too important. I'm closing this book with this for a reason. Yeah, it is second grade. But it is always the ultimate answer as to while we're here. An answer to everything is always incredibly simple. This can't be stressed enough. So in terms of the question that's about to be asked, I mean, you know the answer to this, but how many of us do it in practice? Nevertheless, I have to present it this way. Matt, how could anybody's car being stolen ever be a good day for anybody? Very easily. The day one gets their car stolen can be a great day. Perspective. In this example, let's say a woman from Philadelphia lost her 2 small children shopping in New York City. In the midst of 5 million people, she turned around and in an instant, they were gone. The next day, she gets a phone call from the police, and both of her children are miraculously returned to her in the morning. Let's say 1 hour before the reunion with her children, her car was stolen from the lot where she parked overnight. Do you think she would care one bit about the car as she embraced her children again? Do you think it could be a bad day for her? Of course, we know the answer to this. Everything is up to her. She need not lose her children, though, to see the stolen car as one way or another. Here is Pootie Tang Award example number 2. A man in Florida is diagnosed with stage 2 leukemia. The next day, his car is stolen. But an hour after that, the lab calls him and says there was a mix-up and he was given the wrong results. He has no leukemia and he's just fine. Do you think he cares on that day one bit about his car being stolen? Do you think he'll have a great day? Yes, even a stolen car can be a great day, Pootie Tang Award, based on perspective. Yes, we all know this on paper, but do we really practice it, actively practice it, the way one would work out with weights or would meditate or do an active practice? No, we know it, but active practice every day. Almost nobody does. This is the reason we incarnated here, by the way. Just a little factor as to what we need to do for ourselves. Perhaps these absurd examples may be remembered because they are so simple and absurd, but we all must improve dramatically in this area, and I'll give you a personal story of what happened to me. So when we get to Jedi Mastery level, perspective is always entirely up to us instantly, need not be determined by individual circumstances like the previous examples. This concept right here may be the principle, one of the guiding principles of the spiritual work and the reason we're here. Perspective and its brother, gratitude, are the most important things in this life while we are here. Do we let circumstance determine our perspective when we wield 100% power over it ourselves? I'm sure somebody right now is trying to say to me, Matt, their day only got good because something far worse was wiped away at the same time. Well, of course, but you know what I'm going to say. You know how correct it is what I'm about to say. Why should we let the outside circumstances ever dictate our perspective and perception? We all have a variety of personal examples or memories in our lives we can use as a springboard to remember and to continuously improve in this regard. For example, in January of 2023, just a few weeks after I put both Puss and Boots down because of health issues, I only had 4 days with Puss. She was healthy for only 4 days after her sister Bootsy had been put down. Because anyway, it's a long story. But my third cat, and I have a fourth, but at the time, Fifi Addie, she stopped eating right about the same time. So she didn't eat at all for 2 days, just laid there. And I thought, oh, wait a second. If I have to put 3 cats down in 4 weeks, I mean, this would have been very, very difficult for me to take. Now, sure, I loved and appreciated Fifi Addie before the incident, but not like I do today or after that sort of scare. Of course, I didn't have to wait for that scare to change my perspective. It was always up to me. Practice perspective adjustment actively 20 times every day. Actively is the key to what I'm saying, and do it for the rest of your life. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may is not just talking about rosebuds or the obvious stuff one should appreciate in life, like a beautiful sunset. You have the power to turn almost everything into a rosebud, even a stolen car. Maybe not a few things, like a kick in the balls. Somebody just walked down the street and kicked you in the ball. Oh! What would Matt say in terms of turning this into a positive? Well, there's a few things that aren't very positive, but for the rest, get on with it. Why is the very average movie It's a Wonderful Life so beloved by so many people? It's not that good. I saw it for the 3rd or 4th time recently. I know why it's so good. The ending, though, is perfect. The movie, anyway, but the ending, it's a perfect summation of what is being said here. One moment in the movie, George is about to jump off a bridge, and an hour later, he's the happiest man on earth when not one thing changed in terms of his situation. He was still out the $8,000 or whatever. Only his perspective changed. On the bridge, about to jump, and then what was that angel's name? Was it Clarence? That little Peckerwood boy shows up. Oh, that thing was disturbing to me. If I was, heaven should have sent him down to the pits of hell, but he bothered me. But anyway, it was okay, I guess. But here's what life would have, for those that don't know the movie, oh boy. Here's what your life in this town would be like if you were never born. Look at all the negatives that happen around the town and look how positive your life was. Well, it changed his perspective, but nothing actually changed when he came back to the real world. It's just perception. Scrooge, A Christmas Carol, is exactly the same thing. When he wakes up in the morning, Christmas morning, in terms of his life, nothing has changed at all from an outside world perspective except his own inner perspective and inner perception. Interestingly, both movies and this change of perception is facilitated by angels and ghosts. We ain't got to wait for no angels and ghosts. We can do it ourselves. Now, I've only known one person in this life who is truly superior at doing this, changing perspective and perception immediately. It was my father's friend, Russ. He's been dead now for about 10 years. Who knows where he learned this trait or how he honed the most important quality to succeed in this life, in my opinion. Russ would see the good in absolutely everything. Sometimes it was bordering on the absurd, the perspective he took, if you weren't used to him. So much so, it almost seemed like a fake optimism. It was not, though. It was genuine. He was not faking it to make it. He really believed what he was saying. It was not false if you got to know him over 10 or 15 years. Sometimes the silver lining was small, tiny, but yet it was always there for him, and he would always push it to the forefront. He was not pretending in some desperate attempt to make himself feel better. Here's one story among 20 I could tell you. I think it was in 1979, my father bought his first house. I was close to where I live now. On the walkthrough, the day of his closing, for my dad in 1979, termites were discovered in the walls and support beams. I believe it was the garage. Now, my father was freaking the F out. He acted like though almost everybody else would after getting such bad news. This society has been conditioned to panic regarding termites. In a way, it's a big scam. I mean, you have to take care of it, but it's not like, get somebody in here tonight. I mean, I've had them. It takes months and months for them to do real damage. It's not the panic situation that we've all been brainwashed into believing, but you can understand he never owned a home, how he acted when they found this just hours before his closing. Oh, should I walk away? I'm not buying this house. I can't buy this house with termites. Well, he called his friend Russ, who had several real estate investments at the time, moved into real estate in the mid-'70s after being a teacher at my high school, Upper Merion. Now, Russ said something like this to my father. Termites? My father still talks about the story. Termites? Jim, that's great news. My father was like, what the F are you talking about? That's great news. He's all freaked out. He's conditioned as everybody. Termites, you panic. Russ, I don't know exactly what he said. He went on to explain to my father that it's great that he found out now before the walkthrough and not 2 weeks after moving in, for example. There's no reason to not do the closing, this and that. Go to the closing, Jim. He explained what my father needed to know. Look, long story short, after speaking to Russ for 10 minutes, my father was yet again eager to buy the house, and 2 hours later, he did. Just as Russ said, something good came out of knowing beforehand the house had termites. Maybe my father used that in some way to negotiate something at closing. I don't know. It was a long time ago. Perhaps a change in my father's attitude manifested something positive or a positive result, because his attitude changed the moment he got off the phone with Russ. And Russ wasn't just trying to blow you-know-what up his butt. Russ truly believed this was an advantage, and it turned out in some way to be an advantage. So how much of this is actually manifestation by creative beings? But we'll talk about that some other time. Russ did this stuff constantly. If he missed a ferry down in Florida, Pine Island, to cross the bay, he'd immediately turn around, and he didn't think on it, just turn around and say, this is great. We missed the ferry. This is great. It gives us time to go back to the store to get what we really need. And we'll be back for the next one. You can't fake it to make it for a long time in this regard. You're allowed to start out that way. Fake it to make it works, to get the pendulum moving in the right direction, at least at the very start. Then it has to truly be believed in, and then it starts to manifest in some way. I mean, very quickly, the silver lining picked out must be real for you, as it was for Russ. Russ believed these things 100%, and what appeared to be his rationalizations were completely legitimate. If you just met him, you go, he's constantly just telling himself positive things. It's a sad case, this guy. If you just met him, you'd think it was almost over the top, like I said, like he's just making it up. It was really strange till you got to know him. But guess what? What do you think usually happened? Something positive. In this case, the missing of the ferry, there was a need to go to the store. There's only a few times in life where this attitude and perspective cannot be applied in a very positive way for all of us. It's always up to you. Unless somebody has you strapped down in a chair with a glowing poker an inch away from your nose, like the guy that ran up to you on the street and kicked you in the balls. Other than that, how you see the situation is completely up to you. Most people walk around and what do? They play the victim. Oh, it's outside forces. Oh, if it was a test, they would say it's up to them, right? But do they truly believe that? No. That's why they complain. And
Those damn Democrats.
let me end these examples with a personal story. About 1980 or so, my uncle bought a home in a shore town, Ocean City, New Jersey. For those of you in middle America, the West Coast, remember Snooki and Jersey Shore? Just, 40, 50 miles from that sort of thing, but it was called Ocean City, not Seaside Hikes. We'd have no Snooki. Okay, the first three people who arrived at the house was myself, was about 10 years old, my cousin was about 16, and my father, who drove us both down to the house from the Philadelphia area. It was Memorial Day weekend, and the Indianapolis 500 race was on TV that night. The house had no new furniture. I mean, it's a long time ago. It's all vague, but this is basically what happened. Just relics from the prior owners who may have been renting the old place out. I mean, this was old, dated stuff. The house was old. I mean, we expected what we saw from the house. We expected we'd miss the race, and we were disappointed because that race, the Indianapolis 500, was a big deal to us back then. It was a big deal to a lot of people back then. No, there were no bars where a 10-year-old could be driven out to see the race from a bar. Ocean City was a dry town anyway. You had to go to Summers Point to go to the bars. Anyway, we all accepted that we were going to miss the race and we were out of luck. Now that realization, we're going to miss the race, it established the basis for our perspective. No, the house was new. We're looking around the house. We were searching around for anything interesting we might do that evening. I don't know, perhaps we'd find a deck of cards we could find to pass time that evening until the rest of the family arrived the following morning. About 10 minutes later, after rummaging around, our situation had changed for the better. We found a small black and white television covered in dust, shoved in a closet. It was an absolute piece of crap, even by 1980 standards. But it gave us a bit of hope regarding the race. If the thing would even work, we'd attempt to find the race through the airwaves on the old TV, but there was no aerial at all. There were no rabbit ears, no nothing. Well, it started off good. My father plugged it in and it worked. It lit up with static and the noise of static and that scene from Poltergeist where she tried to talk to the TV people. This is something that a 20-year-old today would never understand and has never experienced. The static of an old TV off its UHF station. We spun around the dusty plastic dials, flipping around this way and that, just desperate to find anything on the old TV at this point, let alone the race. But we had little chance without the necessary aerial. At least at first, every number on the dial was just snow and every VHS channel, every UHF channel. Again, people under 20 don't know what the F I'm talking about. My cousin went searching the house to find something metal that we could fashion into an aerial. What could we find? Found a few metal coat hangers in the closet. So with an old set of pliers that were there, we began to twist the metal and began to fashion a variety of makeshift aerials and antennas. Some of the hangers were steel. We figured some may be aluminum, a little bit of a lighter metal. We didn't know what would make the best antenna or aerial, so we tried everything we could. We tried every configuration we could. We placed the TV into various positions, walking the heavy old black and white thing around the house on an extension cord like a baby, and touching the metal of the coat hanger to random metal parts on the back of the TV. Now, what happened is it was turning into a challenge to see if we could overcome this. What can we see in life that we can turn into a challenge to overcome? That's much more meaningful than shoving a piece of metal where the sun don't shine to see a race. But you know what I mean? It would become a fun challenge. Finally, holding it in a certain position. The metal was here. We're holding it up in the air. We got a weak signal from ABC. Using 2 feet of twisted coat hangers that somebody was holding onto the back. The screen was still, though, 90% static, unwatchable. No sound other than that nasty hiss of white snow. However, the house had this sleeping loft thing where the attic, it was like half the attic and the other part you could get up into through this big hole cut in the ceiling, and it was a sleeping loft. There was a mattress up there. There was a ladder you could climb up. So somebody went up there. We handed the TV up into this little crawl space, which is really part of the attic. The old mattress up there was just under the roof. So we hoisted up the TV to see if the additional height of that loft would help the signal, and it did. About 60% of the static cleared up. We can now hear a little bit of the broadcast and make out the cars as they're going around the oval, continuously turning left. I'm sure you know the end of the story. With an aerial duct taped to both the TV and to the ceiling in some way, the three of us crammed into this tiny space to watch the Indianapolis 500 on an old black and white TV laden with static. The roof was just, again, a few feet above the TV and above our heads. You couldn't stand up in the loft. You had to crawl out and go backwards down the ladder to get down. Now, I know we enjoyed this more than almost any other sporting event we had ever watched for several reasons. It was a change in our perspective that made it so special. It was us working together to overcome the situation, the initial challenge of it. It was the three of us in close quarter with conjoined reality bubbles, as I like to say, instead of sitting on separate couches in a big living room, watching on a perfect picture that none of us would remember the next day. This is how memories are made. What happened that night was different. Even though it was still watching TV, which is a real offense to the righteous truther, it was the most human way to watch TV, if that makes any sense. If the new house would have had a large color TV just waiting for us the moment we walked through the door, being fully furnished, I would have never remembered that particular day. Of course, it would have all been forgotten, blending in with all the rest of life's monotony. The memory was cemented by the unusual experience and circumstances. If you're over age 40, how many birthdays do you remember? I remember none, basically none. I think my mother tried to have a party for me one time when I was a kid. I mean, basically none. However, I'm not saying you should do this, but you understand the point I'm making. On your next birthday, if you're by yourself and if you just step into a closet naked for 5 minutes and think, or go out to your garage and lie down naked in your garage. I mean, okay, you understand. I'm not suggesting that, but do something completely odd. You'll never forget that birthday experience. Now, we can do better than just creating oddball experiences. I want to remember this time out at Denny's breakfast or IHOP. I'm going to slam this egg that's uncracked against my forehead and splatter it everywhere. I'll never forget then. We can do better than that. But that's basically the point. How do you, other than oddball, there's ways we can make things memorable, right? Other than just, I'm gonna take this pancake and throw it in the face of the waiter. Other than that, we need to work on this. How do we make it memorable? This world is designed for one day just blends into the next. That's what the Not Milk wants. So that's what we must fight against. But going back to the initial point of this final section, when something bad happens in life, we're all trained by the Not Milk to play the victim and to complain in some way. This is the first thing we need to change in part 2, the work. Our first reaction should be, this is not ideal at all, but this is how memories are made, and there's probably something positive that will come out of this. How quickly can we change our perception and perspective on that? No matter how bad it is, that perspective is always valid. Well, there are a few exceptions that we talked about here. How wonderful is a nice, pleasant day if it blends into all the rest of our days, with every moment of that nice, pleasant day with nice weather soon to be forgotten. There's no doubt that the good days are actually harder to remember than the bad experiences. No doubt, unless you can find a way to make them memorable. And again, if somebody's saying, well, Matt, why is that so important? Is it so important to make every day memorable? No, but I see we observe what our adversary wants us or wants from us. We observe what the adversary is trying to do to us. Of course, it wants our whole decades to just blend away one day. So if that's what it wants, every day to, in some vague fog, blend into the next, then I will do the opposite. I know to do the opposite from what it wants. How could watching the worst quality broadcast of all time on a tiny black and white TV with static roaring over the sound become the best sporting event I've ever watched on television in my entire life? We had established a lower perspective on what the night would bring. And then our circumstances changed, and it was facilitated by us in some way doing the work or doing some work. What you put into it is what you get out of it. So always make sure you're putting something into what you're doing, which is the opposite of the easy way. What we did in this example, though, was no real big deal. We found a TV and we rigged up an aerial. It's not some incredible Einstein or Edison level, genius level of ingenuity that overcame the situation, but we had to do some work. We had some skin in it. Of the 50 races I've watched in my life, that's the only one I remember. I don't remember every accident, or, in general. That's the only one I remember, other than a few that just took place this year. Just like the woman who got her children returned the day she got her car stolen, the bad news part became completely irrelevant. Why did the horribly bad picture seem so good? Perspective. What if my uncle had bought a $5 million home, fully furnished, and as we walked in, we sat down in a $4,000 leather couch and a perfect brand new television, and then what would happen in that situation if that TV then went to 50% static in the middle of the broadcast? It's the same situation we ended up in, but this would be completely different. On those $4,000 couches, we would say, "What the hell is this? Oh my, what is that? Is that a Zenith or an RCA? Piece of shit." We'd been throwing tomatoes and shit. This is fascinating to me. One, it was the greatest experience of all time. One would have been the worst experience of all time based on the exact same outcome, the TV going to 50% static. I mean, I hate to say it, glass half full, glass half empty, but I guess it's relevant here. How the exact same situation could be seen as one of the worst things of all time or one of the best is absolutely fascinating to me. It proves that everything here is up to us. This is one of the main reasons we incarnated here, to do this sort of work. How far can you take it? How much can you become like a guy like Russ? You have the ability to make just getting out of the bed in the morning the greatest thing that ever happened to you. Perspective. If Josh just jumped out of bed tomorrow morning, it would be the greatest thing that ever happened. Why don't you see it that way? You have the ability to make taking a shower the greatest thing that ever happened to you. I've said this before many times. I don't do it every time, but I like doing it. Turning on the shower or standing in there waiting for it to get hot, I'll often call out the names of the old kings of yesteryear, of antiquity, emperors back through the Ming dynasty, and say, "You didn't have it this good. What I'm about to do, you son of a beach. You and your Zhao dynasty, you greedy sons of bitches. You didn't have it this good. You were some nasty king or emperor that killed people. You never got to experience this." Well, King Charles did. Who is he a real king? Let's just say the kings and emperors of yesteryear. You have it better than they do. Do you say that to yourself before your shower, where you shove a big fat glazed donut in your mouth? Those Ming dynasty sons of bitches and the emperors of the Zhao dynasty, they never tasted no glazed donut. Do you think about that? Okay, maybe this is getting a little ridiculous. It's worth repeating, though. Sorry. The immortal words of Bluto, the John Belushi character from Animal House, after they all got kicked out of the Faber College and they're all sitting around moping around the Delta House, Bluto barged in with his friend D-Day and said, "This could be one of the greatest days of our lives, but you're going to make it the worst. Up to you," see, Bluto's saying. "I'm afraid to go with you, Bluto. We could get in trouble." You could make it one of the greatest. And then they did the parade, the Eat Me float, and they did make it one of the greatest days of their lives. I'm not saying to crash a parade and make an Eat Me float, but there are things you can do that are a little bit less than that. The Christmas season's upon us. For millions, the in-laws are coming in. 16 candles. I wouldn't go in there. Grandpa Fred's been in there for it's your nose. Oh no, the in-laws are coming in. You have the ability to make that lobster dinner with your in-laws the worst day of your life or one of the greatest days of your life. Would a homeless man who hasn't had a good meal in weeks, would he care that the in-laws were at the table as the lobster was being dipped in butter? It's up to you. This is part to the work. The work is difficult, yet very simple at the same time. at least for us. The conspiracy of the world was artificially put there for our group, for our type, to keep us from the most important things in life, from doing part two, the work. And of course, part two, the work is 1,000 other things other than this particular thing that I'm focusing on here. All the conspiracy, all the breadcrumbs, all the mud floods, leave it all behind. Never chase a yellow breadcrumb again. My role is to get the fourth grade truther to graduate level. And I don't want to lose the old guard because I will do my best to laugh at it. I'll go back and do a screen exercise from time to time if we get some laughs, or maybe we learn a little bit about ourselves. Not very tolerant anymore.
Well, you look at Matt, he always goes back into a screen exercise.
Oh, I'm not tolerant of that comment at all. If you've graduated, graduated. I will keep laughing at it enough, hopefully, to keep the old guard here. Part two, the work, is all that matters once you see through the trick, which is part one. Everybody listening to me for months and months has seen through every bit of the trick. So all there is part two. Hundreds of little things you can do for yourself, to give yourself change in perspective, a way of experiencing every single thing you go through in life, a way of improving yourself for the rest of your life. But no, how about the triggered truthers? You do all that for yourself. You change your perception and perspective, and
those that get triggered by saying it's a school.
See, you know how this works? If you learn something about yourself and you've improved, that's kind of like saying a school. I don't know where the triggered aspect comes from. I don't really get that. The fact that we are all doing better than we did 10 years ago proves it's working. There's no finish line. It's becoming the person who your 25-year-old self would not recognize today. I don't want to be appreciated today by my 25-year-old self. That's a good thing. Here's a crystal ball, Matt, 25-year-old self, which I would have been, on my way out to Los Angeles. I guess I went out when I was 26. Matt, here's a crystal ball. Professor Marvel will show you what you're going to be like in your early 50s. And then old Matt from 1996 said, I don't want to be like that son of a bitch. I want my 25-year-old self to despise what I've become. That means you're winning. My 25-year-old self was interested in nothing but not milk stuff. What's the finish line, Matt? How do we know we've done enough? Is there a judge somewhere? No, there's no finish line. It's simply a confidence going into our last days or months or last year, a confidence that we've done enough. What are the metrics on your approval, Matt? How do you score yourself? I don't. It's a confidence that I've done enough. One of the metrics is, who am I now versus when I was 25 or 35? A confidence that I don't need to do this anymore. I've experienced it. And for many of us, we're done with it. Until that time comes, our last few weeks, months, or last year, our job is to continuously find the heaven hidden here amongst all the hell. This can always be done. When you watch The Wizard of Oz and it's the lion's turn to sing his little song, he says, courage. How do you make the squirrel to do that? Courage. I forget the words. But whenever he says courage, you yell out into the room, no matter who you're watching with, yell out perspective. How does the squirrel grow balls to take on the witch? Not courage, perspective. I'm overriding courage with perspective because that brings real courage. Scream it out over The Wizard of Oz so you never forget this most important lesson.
Lesson? Oh, did he imply it was a school?
With our new attitude, we can look back and see how absurd all those conspiracy topics were that we chased for so long, that occupied such a big part of our week. Now, all that we did was not wasted years, though. It was necessary. Overcoming that level of the trick was a bog that we all needed to wade through, at least for a little while. We now see why all of it was placed there before us by the spiritual adversary we call Not Milk. We know now that winning is entirely up to us. It was never up to Not Milk, and Not Milk knows that. It only seemed like it made the rules here. No, you make the rules here. What you will get out of the rest of your life, right through the moment of death, is what you expect and demand to get. Once again, we come full circle and return to what is very simple, forever leaving behind the complicated. I would say, good luck to you, but you don't need it. Thanks for listening to me read this book.